Great peace, great peace, great peace, Yakoki. Now you see what it says right here. L3 gave rise to M and N. M and N gave rise to Native American groups. So it's saying right here, L3, which is Africa, right, gave birth to Native American populations. So if you got African Americans, right, who have haplogroups like L3, L4, L2, L1, L0, L, that means they predate Columbus and they predate Native Americans. Now look at this. Look at this. Adaman Islander. This is on my mom's side. She has M, and that's from my granddad, right? And P2, because my granddad, he looks just like these people, right? The P2, which would be like Tasmanians, um, Australians, Melanesians. He looks just like them. So I'm guessing that either his mother or father must have looked like the Adam and Eve. I couldn't get a good. I don't have a good picture of them, his parents, but that's it. Just it's interesting when you look at that. Like the P2 and M made it together. You know what I mean? And this is in 1800 AD. 1800 AD. So you got the Ottoman Islanders mating with the um, Ottoman Islanders mating with the Melanesians, and they're mating with the um, Australians. And I saw in one of the videos that one of the persons did look like an indigenous Australian who was with the Jawa. So I was like, okay, there's some history there. They know each other. Um, so that's what I wanted to show. I wanted to show that. I wanted to show that. And I have, let me see my percentage of M. Let me see my percentage. Okay. So 62, no, 0.62%. All right. So that's my percentage. Um, and L, right? Let me see L. Is this L? Yeah, L, 94%. So that just goes to show you, like, even when we see these ancient populations, like the Adamanese and all these other people, right? When we see them, we don't think that, there's even African Americans who have older phenotypes than some of them, older phenotypes. We don't think that because a lot of us have haplogroup L. You know what I mean? And a lot of them probably do have L too because they have M. You know, so that's why I don't understand why people, when they see African Americans, right? African Americans don't think like, maybe I should try to preserve my bloodline because I'm gonna meet these people again one day. You know what I mean? Like, look at that possible time of origin, 50,000 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. You're supposed to keep that blood intact. Like, why would you get rid of that blood? It makes no sense. Why would you get rid of that blood? You know what I mean? And a lot of our people, right, they're mixing more than ever in 2026. They're mixing, they're mixing, they're mixing. They're mixing with lighter populations. You got California women, right, mixing with Mexicans. You got Minnesota people mixing with Somalis, right, which is kind of like an Arab kind of feature, right? You got let me see. Like they're doing it like, and I'm not saying that it's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying like I'm just pointing it out. Like, you know, people are not keeping their bloodlines intact. Um so that's a sad fortune. That's a sad situation right there. That's very sad. They're not keeping their blood intact. So mitochondrial Eve L. So I have L. I think I have a bunch of L's with numbers. See M. And let me look at L0. Okay. Yeah, I believe I have L0 too. So yeah, like people just they're not keeping their bloodlines intact. Like they're complaining about being enslaved, right? And they're really not enslaved. It's just in the mind. They're really not enslaved. If anybody was enslaved, it was Africans, because they had to deal with Napoleon, right? Chopping their people heads off and stuff like that. Americans didn't have to deal with that degree of brutality. Like people just coming in and just killing off the people. They didn't have to really deal with that to that level. Because like when you look on our censuses, right, it didn't say anything about being a slave. It just said like we were farmers. You know what I mean? Like that's what we were doing. Um, but you look at African history is kind of different because like they really were enslaved. You know, which is why like you look at some of their parts, their villages, right? It lacks infrastructure. You know, like even to this day, like their raw resource is cheated. So that's L0, L01, L1, um, yep. So that's what I mean. They don't talk about that stuff, man. They don't. They don't. Iranians, okay. So this is something else. L2. Yeah, but like people aren't keeping their bloodlines intact and it's in the head. Like they're enslaved in the mind. They're enslaved in the mind. They're not keeping their bloodlines intact. Like people were scared to point out the fact that, like, if you talk about color, you get called a racist, you get called xenophobic, you get called stuck up, you get called all these things if you talk about color. Like people just they don't want to deal with the facts. You know, like if I mix with a white person or if I mix with a group that's like a lighter population, right? And the kid, like if I have a child and the kid comes out lighter than me, right? Like, what am I supposed to say? Like, what am I supposed to say at that point? You know what I mean? But it shows that we have broken communities. We have broken communities. If you have a broken community, that's what will happen. That's what will happen if you have a broken community. You know. So hopefully, there's not a lot of mixing going on in the future. Like when people finally figure the truth out, and like haplogroups, because like when you talk about haplogroups, right, that includes your color, like the pigmentation of your skin, and also um, your proximity to the person that's next to you. So like if I'm if I live in a community, right, and I see someone who looks like me, right, I'm supposed to stay with this person. I'm not supposed to leave them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not supposed to do that. So, at some point down the line, we were mixing. You know what I mean? Like, that may be a third, fourth, fifth, sixth distant cousin. And a lot of these communities is like that too. And a lot of the communities we live in, like, we moved to a city, we got family there, and people don't even know that. Like, you move to a city, you probably got family there. Like, if you move to a city and there's African Americans there and you African American, you related somehow. Like, you all mixed before, you know? Because, like, all groups of people, all distant populations, at some point they had endogamy, you know what I mean? Like, where they practice, uh, where they practice, sharing DNA. That's a more cleaner way of putting it. Um, so yeah, that's what I want to say. So, you know what I mean? And I got A right over here. See, I got A right here. See, like the first one, mtDNA. So this relative of mine, right, was L0, you know? L0. So think about that though. Like, when you're trying to create a community and you're mixing out, like, think about that. Will your percentages lower? Like, if you have E1B, will they lower? You know what I mean? Like, will your A percentages lower? Will your A1 percentages lower? Will your A0 percentages lower? Will your B2 percentages lower? Like, you gotta think about it. Like, what humans are you creating on this planet when you mix out? You know. So that's all I want to say. Great peace, Yakuki.